Hello, this is Chris with Bailey, and welcome to the overview session of how to set up and configure landed cost within NetSuite. So this is for any NetSuite customers looking to roll costs associated with bringing items into inventory and tracking costs associated with purchasing items apart from the material cost itself. For example, landed costs can include duty fees, insurance, and shipping costs. And this will give you the ability to see into the cost of procurement and also give you a more accurate valuation of your inventory. So to start, we need to enable a couple features in order to use and set up landed cost. So to do that, we're going to go to Setup, Company, Enable Features. And the first feature we're going to enable is landed cost itself. So we're going to come select Items and Inventory subtab, scroll down to the inventory field grouping here, and then scroll down to find landed costs and enable that. Now, if you don't see this to be enabled, that likely means you do not have the NetSuite Inventory Management Cloud Service module that you need in order to set up landed costs. And so you need to reach out to whoever your NetSuite representative is in order to get that module provisioned to your account. Once we enable that, what we'll do is save our features. Since we've already enabled it, we'll move on to the next preference to set up. And that is actually an accounting preference to enable expenses on purchasing. So to do that, we'll go to the Order Management subtab here and scroll down to the Purchasing field grouping, and we'll see we have the preference to allow expenses on purchases. Then from here, we will save this as well. Now the next thing that we want to do is actually make sure that our item record is also configured to track landed costs. So once you enable that landed cost feature, we'll actually pull up an item record itself, select our iPad Pro 32 gigabyte here, and then what we'll see is if we scroll down to the Purchasing and Inventory subtab, we'll see we have a Track Landed Cost field that we need to check. This needs to be checked in order to accurately track landed costs as it's associated with bringing this item into inventory. So now that we've done some of the feature setup, now it's time to set up some of the cost categories and expense categories associated with bringing this item in. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is set up our cost categories. And to do that, we'll go to Setup, go to Accounting, Accounting Lists, make sure we select our cost category type for our accounting list, and then we'll see we have a couple of different cost categories, but the one to focus on is inbound freight. And if we open up this record, we'll see we have a specific expense account associated with this cost category and the cost type itself. Now that we've set up this cost category, the next thing that we want to do is set up our expense category as well. And what we're going to do is actually mirror that cost category as an expense category. So what we'll do is click on this, take a look and see that we're associating again the same expense account with this expense category, and if you have a one world account with multiple subsidiaries, you would make sure to designate the appropriate subsidiaries within this expense category. So now that we've set up the appropriate features on the item records and for the system to start tracking landed cost and all the cost categories, let's go ahead and enter a purchase order for this particular product. Let's go to Transactions, Purchases, enter purchase orders. From here, we'll enter our vendor, select that vendor there, and we'll scroll down here and select that item that we were just looking at, the iPad Pro 32 gigabyte. We'll put in a quantity of 10. And then here on the expense subtab is where you're going to associate that expense category with this purchase order. And you'll see it sources in that expense account that we had on the expense category record. And then we're going to put in an amount here for $50. Now at this point, it is just an estimate as far as what we think we will end up paying for this specific expense category. And when we ultimately get the bill in, I will show you how we account for that as well. And also we'll want to select a location, seeing as that's a mandatory field. And then from here, we will save this purchase order. Now, once we ultimately do receive this order into inventory, we'll open up our item receipt record from our purchase order. And the thing to note here is this tab for landed cost. Here is where we're going to choose our cost allocation method and designate the amount. So we're going to put in that $50 that we originally thought we would end up paying, and then we're going to associate the cost allocation method with the quantity. If you want to associate by weight, for example, you just need to make sure on the item record that you input the weight for that specific item so that it can accurately calculate that cost out. Now that we've got everything associated with our item receipt, we're going to save that, and then we're going to move into the billing process. But before we do that, let's take a look at our GL impact here and see that we're actually crediting that expense account based on that landed cost that we set up earlier in this presentation. Now let's come back to this purchase order here and enter in the vendor bill. Now from here, what we're going to do is take a look at our expense line and say, okay, well, if we received in this bill and our expense ended up being actually $60, what we want to actually do is input that information at the line level of this vendor bill. So we'll set up a non-inventory item for purchase to represent that category, input that here, and say it actually came in at $70 instead of that $50 we originally thought. Make sure to remove that expense line over here, and then make sure to associate the landed cost category that we set up earlier in the demo as well. We'll hit OK, and then from here we need to make sure to input our reference number for our vendor bill. This will help reference this bill when it comes time to changing the item receipt to reflect the change that we have with actually receiving that inventory in. So now we will save this bill, and then the next thing we want to do is actually come back to that item receipt and adjust that landed cost amount that we had over here on this subtab. So now instead of using a manual source, we're going to look at another transaction. And this is where we use that reference number that we entered in on the vendor bill. And that's why it's important to make sure to fill out this reference number here. So we see 220345. We will say 220345. We have our transaction pull up right there. And now we will save that here. And now if we look at our GL impact again, you will see that $70 reflected on the receipt and also correspondingly on the bill itself. And so that is how you set up and configure landed costs within NetSuite. If you need any help or additional resources for landed cost setup and configuration, you can use Suite Answers or the Help Center. And as always, we are here to help. So please click the link below to get in touch. Thank you.